when the chorus sings, Freude, schöne Götterfunken, Tochter aus Elysium, wir betreten feuertrunken, himmlischer dein Heil. Who can resist that? You can't resist, because you hear the passion and the depth of feeling.
I'm Zsolt Bognár, and this is Living the Creative Life. Our guest today is Conductor Benjamin Zander. Well, Ben, before I even thank you for being here, I wanted to say that we have an unusual opportunity here, because this is the first time in the 12 years so far that I've done this show that I've ever been face-to-face on camera with one of my former teachers.
Well, I remember very clearly 26 years ago, you were sitting at the piano in my class playing the Waldstein Sonata, first movement. I remember what you looked like, I remember the sound you make, I remember everything about it. And so to be together with you now, and you're doing something so valuable for the world and for the community of music lovers, and so it's an honor to be here.
I mean, of course, we had our whole lives ahead of us, but you empowered us, you made us feel and believe that we could do anything. I don't think that since that time I've ever felt quite like that.
Of course, at that age, that is a natural thing for young people to feel. I believe that it's our job as teachers, parents, friends, coaches, conductors, to keep that feeling going always, even when people get older. And that's the role of the leader, is to put wind under the wings of the people that they're responsible for. When I say responsible, I don't mean as parents necessarily or as teachers, but as fellow citizens, because we all lose track of our beliefs, our desires, our dreams for the world, for society, and get discouraged. Particularly, I think this is a time now when people are feeling very discouraged. The whole issue of the planet and the degradation of the world we're living in, and the arguments and the fighting, it's so depressing. So we have to be very disciplined about keeping the language that we speak, and the body language also, buoyant and energized and engaged, and allowing people around us to have wind under their wings so that they can fly. And I keep doing that. I'm 84 now, and I keep doing that, and I do it with the orchestras that I conduct, and I do it as much as possible with people around me, because I know that that's a necessary function for human beings, to provide that wind under the wings. It's not too difficult to think of ways of creating what I call pathways through the despair, the disappointment, the resignation, the cynicism. Cynicism, it's very interesting to think what a cynical person. A cynical person is a passionate person who doesn't want to be disappointed again. That's all cynicism is. So in the background, there's the passion. So we speak to the passion and reignite it, constantly reignite it. You've won every heart in the room. Now sing. Now you're remembering. Gorgeous. Yeah, good. That was so beautiful. And there wasn't anybody in this room who didn't respond to you. Everybody said, yes, that's how it is. Gorgeous. You have that capacity, but you forget, because you're so musical and you're so interested in your cello. Be interested in life and relationships and what the composers are trying to say. All right? Beautiful. Do it one more time.
How do we get ourselves out of the downward spiral?
Good. That's a great question. This is instantaneous, and it can happen to anybody, anytime. The downward spiral is everywhere, right? It never goes away. This is, you'll be quite sure. Do you know when the downward spiral ends? When you die, okay? It's only one of the only nice things about dying right? It's finally, that goes away, all right? And I always did a design on the board. When I came into the class on Friday afternoon, we were having tea, I would go to the blackboard and I would draw this design. On one side was the downward spiral and the other was radiating possibility. And the point about these two is that this could also be upward spiral. This is the struggle of life. This is the issue of are we winning or losing or failing or succeeding? And this is where fear lies, because people are in competition with each other and they're looking over their shoulders and anxiously wondering. I mean, it's a state of mind that most people live in. And this is also the side where people have ambitions for wealth and fame and power, which is the essential role over here. This is radiating possibility, and none of those things have any place here. This is about community and sharing and inclusiveness and joy and love. And here are the shining eyes, and this is the secret to the whole thing.
So what is possibility? And is this any different from blind optimism?
Yes, that's a very good question. It's very confusing because it sounds like positive thinking. Positive thinking is pretending things are good when you know they are terrible. And that actually can be very detrimental, to pretend that things are great. Possibility is creating an opening, a door, a pathway into something by creating, saying, or doing something which creates a new opening. And that always has to have some real substance behind it. It's a discipline. We think success is great, failure is bad. No. Some terrible things happen. My father was interned after the war. You know, he was an immigrant from Nazi Germany. And he lost everything. He lost his mother in the concentration camp. 8 members of his family wiped out. And then he lost his home, his belongings, his career, his everything. Came to England, and after a while they interned all the Germans, like the Americans did with the Japanese, and he found himself in a prison camp with 2,000 men, all in a state of great, Hitler was in Paris. They were tremendous anxiety and worry and depression. He looked around and said, there are a lot of intelligent people here, let's start a university. And they started a university in that camp. They had 46 classes a week. And no books, no paper, nothing, just people talking to each other. And there's one story which I can tell to your community, which people wouldn't understand, but your community will understand this. There was an old man in that group of people in the internment called Leo Wurmser, and he was the co-repetitor of the Berlin Opera. And my father, who knew a lot about the opera and what was going on, he knew that he had a phenomenal memory. And so he asked Leo Wurmser if he could get some paper, would he write out the choruses? And so my father persuaded one of the guards to steal some blue book exam books from his daughter's school. And he came with these, and my father and a couple of friends wrote out pages and pages of the 5 lines, and then Leo Wurmser wrote from memory the choruses. And my father said they sang the Prisoner's Chorus from Fidelio. He said it wasn't the best performance, but it was one of the most memorable. Can you imagine all these people, amateur people, singing the Prisoner's Chorus in that? So possibility is always open. There's always a choice. And that's why I put that sign every week to remind the young musicians there's always a choice. Discouragement is a given, exhaustion is a given, just a feeling of despair that comes over when it seems as though the forces against us are so huge. And there's always a pathway forward. And Beethoven has taught us that. I'm here in New York because I'm about to conduct Beethoven's 9th Symphony in Carnegie Hall. And if anybody has taught us that, think of him, ill, deaf, alone, isolated, in conflict with family members, in a state of such depression early on in his connection with his deafness that he considered suicide. And he wrote, tum, pum, pee, dum, pum, pum, pum. How is that possible? And the Ninth Symphony, he wrote a whole symphony to tell the world that there's always a pathway to triumph. And we learned that from Beethoven. I think it changed the world.
One of the things that left an enormous impression on me during your classes was just generally in life, you're calling to attention people who are outsiders, people whose plight as marginalized people would inform the way we would feel certain music. Where did this come from in your life?
Tell me who you're referring to. You mean composers?
Anyone at all, really.
Yeah.
You brought in Mahler to the picture.
Yeah.
You told us about the plight of the Jews. And you told us about anyone who felt like an outsider, yeah. Schubert, for example.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's interesting you said that. I didn't think of it that way. I tell stories because stories bring things alive. We live life as a story. And I'm very clear that music is storytelling. It's always about something. Even a Bach fugue is about something. So I always ask that question, what's it about? What are you trying to express? And not just play it, but feel it. And so telling stories about people and about situations like I did in that class was a source of building resources for people to draw on when they came to play this great music, because they hadn't had those experiences themselves. They were 15 years old. But if I told a story, I remember when you played that Waldstein, you played and I remember saying, Beethoven was wild. He was so unkempt that he was put in, do you remember I told you, he was put in jail by the police because they thought he was a tramp. But he with his wild hair and his ridiculous, dirty, and he was restless like that. And you played. I remember the place just was on fire with excitement when you played that. And that's how we do it, through telling stories, through relating music to life, because music is life. It's not separate.
Ben, each week at the class, you gave us a white sheet of paper. Yeah. It was blank, and I didn't know what to do with that. I remember there was one particular day where you said, everyone, you have an A. And then I remember at the end of that day, you also spoke about, there was a phrase that I remember where you said, the sky is not the limit.
Yes.
These two things happened on the same day. What was the white sheet? Why did you give us an A at the beginning of the semester?
I came home from class one day at the conservatory, because I taught at New England Conservatory for 45 years. I had a class there for graduate students. And one day I came home and said to Roz, I said, these kids are so anxious about their grades, about the competition, about the pecking order, about the whole competition thing, that they can't give room for this great music to be played. You can see it in their body language. And she said, we'll give them all an A at the beginning of the year. And then we worked out that that wasn't enough, because if everybody gets an A, then people say, yeah, but what's my grade really? So what we did, I asked them to write a letter in the first 2 weeks of class, you remember, which was to say, it was a letter to me saying, dear Mr. Zander, I got my A because. It was then an opportunity to describe who they will be by the following May, which is when the class ends. So the date is May of the next year. They're writing in September. The date is the next year's end of the class, and they're writing about who they will have become by that time. And that's the person I teach. When I walk in, I teach the person who they have in their mind as who they want to be, without the voice telling them they can't do it. And of course, it changes the relationship completely, because then I'm speaking to the best part of the people in the room, and they are feeling very understood and valued, and they get close. And so by coming close to me as a teacher and I to them, I can then tell them the truth about what's going on in their lives and what they're accomplishing.
Well, it was a letter to you, but it also felt scary and exciting. It also felt like a letter to ourselves. It almost felt like a confrontation with ourselves and who we wanted to become.
Exactly.
That was something that I had never had a chance to do. And I also recall the fact that people seemed to be extraordinarily ignited, like there was a flame under them. I remember there were particular classmates, I can think of them specifically. They would raise their hands and say, "This is what I'm feeling right now about my life."
People have that inside them. The thing is to bring it out, to elicit that beauty, that heart, that depth of feeling, that vision that young people have, and to just allow it to be. I mean, I think my main role in life is unlocking. That's what I think. People come in with closed bodies, closed minds, closed feelings, unable to express what they want to say, and they're waiting for somebody to invite them to speak or to play and to give everything that they have. And the same is true in an orchestra. The power is in the players. The conductor doesn't make a sound. The players are the ones, and all that's needed is to pull out that power that's in them. And that's the role of the leader generally, not just the leader of an orchestra or the leader of a music school. It's what leadership is enabling other people to be the best they can be.
Ben, I'm going to take the role of the skeptic for a minute. I'm putting myself in the shoes of someone watching this. Let's hope there aren't too many of them. And they hear this discussion about beautiful idealism, and they say, well, I don't really, that all sounds like, beautiful bullshit. I don't see how that applies to my life in practice. What do you say to people who have resistance to what I know we have experienced? I know the effect that it had on me in shaping who I became.
You should remember that we are dealing with music. We're not having these conversations in the pub, right? We're dealing with music. We're dealing with Brahms and Schubert and Bach and Beethoven and all these incredible composers. And that's what happens with their music. That's what that music does for people. You play a Brahms trio, you play a Beethoven sonata, and you feel this welling up of energy and beauty. And that's what the composers are pulling out of us. And what we're talking about is that form in conversation or in a leadership situation. And we all know, I think everybody watching this channel has had that experience with great music. At the end of the Beethoven Ninth, when the chorus sings, Freude, schöne Götterfunken, Tochter aus Elysium, wir betreten feuertrunken, himmlischer dein Heil. Who can resist that? You can't resist, because you hear the passion and the depth of feeling and the energy behind that music and about the idea of the word. The words are saying, all human beings can be as brothers. That is a view of possibility. That's an ideal. It's a vision. It's a dream, which Beethoven is bringing through Schiller to our attention. The other thing he says, Deine Zauber binden wieder, was die Mode streng geteilt. Your magic, talking to God, your magic brings together, binds together, was die Mode streng geteilt, what habit and fashion have torn apart. All the conflicts in the world exist because of that flaw of human beings, to be the victims of habit and fashion. The habit of being right, the habit of demeaning other people, the habit of fear, it's so many things that we do that pull us away from other people. And what Beethoven and Schiller are saying is, if we could get over that resistance, By giving up those assumptions, we could be as brothers, all human beings in the world. That's a powerful vision. And then you add the music to it, and it's irresistible. And even the cynics, you remember the cynic is the passionate person who doesn't want to be disappointed again. The person you're describing is a cynic. And I say, speak to the passion and they won't resist it, particularly if you bring great music. The whole thing is about mindset. It's towards attitude. And attitude can be changed in an instant. You can be feeling absolutely miserable and suddenly, bum, bum, bee, bum, 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 bee. You hear that music and you suddenly wake up and say, oh, I forgot. Life is great. Life is a miracle. That's our job to remember. Life is a miracle.
What would be the one takeaway that you hope people would respond to based off of what you have been living through your music and your life?
This is addressed to the teachers now. Every lesson you give to a student is going to have unbelievable ripples out in the world, beyond anything you can imagine. Every hour that you give. And we forget that. We think we're just teaching somebody to do. No. This is about ripples. It goes out endlessly. And that's a deep satisfaction to realize. At the end of a life, which is what I'm nearing now, I mean, 84, you can't expect too much more. I'm going on as long as I can. The sense of ripples is enormously satisfying and giving joy, tremendous joy, much more joy than wealth, fame, and power.
Ben, thank you so much for being on the show. If I can so immodestly include myself in the category of the ripples, thank you so much for influencing who I have become in my musical life, which has taken unusual turns, and I'm so delighted to have reconnected here on this show, which I never thought would be part of my life.
Well, thank you, and if I may say so, you are a huge ripple, because imagine what you've done by bringing all these distinguished and accomplished and wonderful people to the world as friends, as inspirers, as models. You are enriching hundreds of thousands of lives.
Thank you,
when
Ben.
you played the Waldstein Sonata, when I remember when you were 16 years old, you were doing that. That's where it begins. Art is so powerful. We forget how powerful it is.